Talking with Jerry.
Okay, don't forget to like and subscribe. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And tonight I'm talking about something interesting. It is the origin of hip hop, pre-recording. What is the true story of how rap or hip hop music got its start in New York City before it was on record?
Russell Simmons says, we cannot do a documentary about the masterminds of hip hop without the foundation. One of the key voices should be Jerry Roebuck. I learned from him, and he, for sure, not me, was the greatest promoter of hip hop pre-recordings.
Yeah, well, you can't mention, for any obviously old heads or people who have been around 2-3 generations since hip hop began. A lot of younger people, since this is the predominant music in the world, at least they know his name, but he should be given all of the credit for the origin, for his hard work, and really taking it from nothing to being a multi-billion-dollar industry. I don't know if it would exist without him. So, you definitely got to give him credit.
Jerry, there have been many stories and countless interviews over the years on the origins of hip-hop and rap music and how it got started before it was on records. So what's the true origin?
Well, there's been so much debate. I mean, there's college classes on this. There's been books written. There's interviews I've seen on TV. And of course, all over YouTube, there's people with their opinions, people who weren't there, people who heard this, people who somebody told them this. And, most of it is just inaccurate because it's hearsay. So this is just my story. I was there. I helped create it. I helped make it happen from the onset. So even though there's a prelude to this, there's a beginning before there was a beginning. That'll be another episode. But what I want to do today is tell you, before hip hop was on record, before the Sugar Hill Gang came along, what happened? What made hip hop begin in its true origins? So first of all, I want to say that, people give a lot of credit to the Bronx. People say, oh, hip hop started in the Bronx. I would kind of disagree with that. I would give the Bronx its credit, its props, because, a lot of the street dancing came out from the Bronx. A lot of the outside parties that were in the parks up in the projects, yes, that started up in the Bronx. But the era before that was something that I want to begin to talk about, and how we got to the DJs and how we got to the hype men. And it really comes out of parties, which were in the disco era or even pre-disco era. And people used to play records on a record player, and it was a 45. There weren't even 12 inches then. And primarily in that party era, everybody played slow records. People used to dance to slow records. And then fast records started to become a little more popular. You had, of course, the Motown sound. You had the Stack sound with Isaac Hayes and people like that. And then, as you got into the Philly sound, which was more upbeat, everybody from the OJs, MFSB, so many of those acts, people were then dancing more off of these records. And then, of course, we know disco was beginning in the early 70s. So my part of it was I was a promoter. I was promoting clubs, and then started to promote discos as early in high school in the early 70s. But 1973, I began to be a promoter on my own using the name Jerry Productions when I was a student, a freshman at City College of New York. And as I began to give these parties, the purpose was to have people come back over and over again, to build up a following, to build up a crowd. And it wasn't just your party, it wasn't just where you were having it at, but the DJ became an important part. Why? Because you wanted the dance floor to stay crowded. You wanted people to come to the party, hear good music, and dance, because dancing was becoming popular, especially as disco was starting to take off. So the DJ was important, because in the era prior to that, you would put on a record and you would play the record to the end and it would stop, and then people would get off the dance floor. And if they put on another good record, you'd have to get on the dance floor again and have to go to the girl and say, hey, you want to dance again? Or go to another girl, which is like, if you think of it today, it was corny, but that's the way it was. And I remember going to parties in that era. I don't mean a house party, I mean parties in church basements and so forth. But now you have the two turntables, you're playing one record, you're going to the next record, and you want to keep the crowd on the dance floor, okay? So that was the beginning of the DJ becoming popular. A guy who could go from one record to the next and keep that crowd dancing. And if you had a DJ that could do that and you put his name on the flyer, you could bet, besides your name, which was mine, was Jerry Productions, and the location where you were having your party, you would have a big crowd. Now, there were popular DJs at this time from all over New York City. In Brooklyn, you had DJ Plummer, you had Maboya. In the Bronx, you had Pete DJ Jones. You had Richard Hart, Michael P. Reggie Wells is another DJ I started. You had the Disco Twins. You had Carl TNT. You had somebody who was Grandmaster Flowers, way before Grandmaster Flash. And he was from Brooklyn. The problem was that if you wanted to go to parties and you heard of these great DJs, if you lived in the Bronx and you heard about Grandmaster Flowers, you wouldn't go to Brooklyn. Why? Because you'd probably get beat up. You'd probably get robbed. Now, today, we know when people come from other areas, it's really dangerous. People get shot, and there was an era where people get beat up bad or even stabbed. But back in this era, somebody might, oh, those guys, they look like they're from the Bronx, man. Who they think they are coming down here to Brooklyn? And there might be some fisticuffs, especially you talk to one of their girls, things like that. So really, people didn't go from the Bronx to Brooklyn to party. People didn't go from Brooklyn to the Bronx. I was just in New York at a funeral, and some of the guys were from Lower Manhattan, from the projects by the Brooklyn Bridge, and they were talking, said, yeah, remember when we were younger, them guys from Brooklyn came over the bridge, we used to chase them back over the bridge. That was that era in New York City. So these DJs, people were only exposed to them in their own boroughs. And as they were becoming popular, people that lived in that borough, they championed their own DJs. But as I began to promote my parties, one of the things I wanted to do was do them in Manhattan, in Lower Manhattan, around the Times Square area, in the 40s and the 50s in Manhattan, where people could come from Brooklyn and feel safe. People could come from the Bronx and feel safe. And the crowd could mix, and nobody was going to get into, oh, you from Brooklyn, you from the Bronx. So my first parties were at the Martinique on 57th Street in Manhattan. And though it was a college crowd, some of my college classmates could come from Queens. They could come from Brooklyn. They could come from the Bronx. They could come from Harlem. And everybody got along. They were coming to hear the DJs and just have fun. And it was really a great time. And everybody came from these different boroughs. And even though the DJs were from different places, everybody got along.
Wow. So when did you first get exposed to these MCs or hype men talking over records?
That's a really good question. So these beginning DJs, as I was mentioning, all they did was keep the people on the dance floor going from one record to the next. But here's where the next step evolved. And that was somebody talking on the microphone, introducing the next record. So they might say, let's say it was in that big disco era, they might say, oh, well, you're listening to Donna Summer, and coming up next, the Tramps, Disco Inferno. So now the crowd, you're already dancing, and you know the most popular record at the time, Disco Inferno's getting ready to come up. You or the girl you're dancing with is not going to get off of the dance floor, because the DJ who who is either working with the guy playing the records, or maybe the guy playing the records himself has introduced the next record. But some of these guys were only good DJs going from one record to the next, like Plummer, like Grandmaster Flash, even P. DJ Jones, who was from the Bronx. They couldn't talk over the record. They had a voice that was not booming, a voice that was not a hype voice that would get you excited. It was just like a guy talking on the phone. So they began to find these hype guys. So Plummer, who was a big DJ, got a guy named Sedley B, who used to be on the rides at Coney Island, and he would hype up the people to get on the rides and be chanting, and he now comes to the parties. Pete DJ Jones gets KC, the Prince of Soul. Now he becomes his hype man. So now you have the DJ going from one record to another, keeping people on the dance floor, keeping the beat going, the best part of the record, and now he's got a hype man that's keeping people on the dance floor, not only introducing the next record, but saying all types of slogans and like Michael P. in the place to be. These guys would come up with these rhymes that would also keep you excited and, make the crowd, make all kind of noises as they began to party. Now, this went on for about a 2-year period in the early 70s till you get to the mid 70s. And then as we start to get to the late 70s, there's another evolution. And that was guys who weren't just introducing the next record. It wasn't just saying, a slogan or a little rhyme. They were starting to put together stories. They were starting to tell something, whether it was about the party, whether it was about something that you could recite. So they could say hotel, motel, Holiday Inn. They're telling a story about, I'm going to meet this girl and I'm with my man, so why don't you bring a friend? There was a car service called OJ that the guy, when you left a party, there wasn't Uber, yellow cabs wouldn't stop for black people downtown, but we had something called OJ with these luxury car services, which was Lincoln Town Cars and Fleetwood Brohams, and you would call a number and say, okay, I need an OJ, I'm on 57th and 7th Avenue, and the car would come pick you up. So they started to talk about that over the records, because at the end of the party, you would be outside of the club and you call an OJ to come pick you and your girl up, or you and your friends up. So now it's starting almost to evolve to a full story. So I'm a successful promoter. I'm actually the #1 club promoter for the black community and the Hispanic community in New York City. I'm doing all the parties. I'm doing Boom by Macau. I'm doing parties at Cork in the Bottle, the Riverboat, La Martinique, Leviticus, Justine's, you name any club, Broadway International. I was the promoter. I worked with, at this time period, in the organized crime families of New York City, mainly the Gambino family, controlled a lot of the nightlife in New York City. And if you were a black promoter and you wanted to promote a party downtown, in many cases, I got a call, hey, Jerry, there's this guy calling, man. Who is this guy? Is he okay? Can we trust him? Boom, 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 boom. And if I gave a recommendation, that person would be allowed to do a party at a club. That's the kind of clout that I had. And one of the places that I went to was a hotel called the Hotel Diplomat, which was right on 43rd, between Broadway and 7th Avenue. They had a huge ballroom that held over 1,000 people, because my parties were growing and I needed a much larger venue, not a place that would hold 500 or 600 like Ipanema, some of the other places that I was doing. And at the Hotel Diplomat was one of the first times I started using radio. At that time, WBLS, Frankie Crocker was the biggest DJ actually in the country. I went on later to be a partner with him doing certain big parties and events. And at these parties, what I did was I would create slogans. So I would have the Kool and the Gang came out with a record which was big, and it started with Open Sesame. So I named the ballroom at the Hotel Diplomat the Sesame. I just gave it its own club name. And every time I would have a party there, I would start off with that Cool in the Game record, Open Sesame. And then we would talk about Come to the Sesame, and DJ Eddie Cheever is going to be there. And on the Wheels of Steel is going to be boom, boom, boom. And everybody in New York City would get excited, and I would pack the place out. So one of my DJs who I mentioned that I helped start was a guy named Reggie Wells. He was a teenager. He was dating a young lady who was my girlfriend's youngest sister. And I was kind of her guardian. And so I meet Reggie, and he starts dating her, and he wants to learn about DJing. He heard I was a promoter. He doesn't know what a promoter is, but eventually, because he's not 18, a year later, I take him to one of my parties, and he's fascinated by seeing what a DJ does. So Reggie, from a teenager, he wants to become a DJ. And over time, he learned, and he did go on to learn to cut records and go from one record to the next, and then go and get a job at a club called 371 in the Bronx. And of course, what we were talking about earlier, how, yes, the Bronx should get a lot of credit for the origins of rap and hip hop. And if you read Russell Simmons' biography, he talks about Club 371. And in 371, there was this DJ named DJ Hollywood. And he's the guy that I really think should get credit for creating the term hip hop, because he used to say, hip hop, you don't stop. So Reggie tells me about this guy, DJ Hollywood, but he says, Jerry, you got to come and hear this guy, because he rhymes over the records. And after he introduces the record, he keeps going. And I said, what are you talking about? He keeps going. After you introduce the record, why would you keep talking? People want to hear Donna Summer sing. People want to hear the Tramps sing. People want to hear MSSB. They want to hear the beat. People want to hear James Brown say, get on up. So if he's continuing to talk, why would people like that? And he says, no, he finds the best part of James Brown, get on up. And then he puts in his own little story, and the crowd goes with it. And then he'll say, let's rock. And then the crowd knows to say, let's roll. And he'll say, put your hands up in the air. And then the crowd will go, and we're going to wave them like we just don't care. And I still can't envision how this is happening. I just can't. So he says, you got to come up to 371. You got to hear this guy Hollywood, because we got to get him to the Hotel Diplomat, because he's in the Bronx, and people in the other boroughs, they heard of him, but they're too scared to go up to the Bronx and see him because it's too dangerous. So I said, okay, Reggie, I'll come up to the Bronx. So I knew 371 was kind of like a hole in the wall. And I go up there one Saturday night. There's a little crowd outside. And I come in. So I'm upstairs. And I say this upstairs for a reason. And the music is going. And, people are partying. And after 20 minutes, I'm like, I don't hear nobody talking on no mic. I don't hear nobody even introducing records. This is like disco 3-4 years ago. They just playing the records and the people are dancing. And so after a few more minutes, I'm like, I don't even see Reggie. I'm going to leave. I'll come back another time. So as I'm making my way through the crowd to get to the front door to leave, Reggie yells my name. Yo, Jerry, over here. And I walk over to him. I said, Reggie, why you have me come up here? I don't hear no DJ Hollywood. I don't hear nobody talking on the microphone. This is really kind of like a dead party. He said, no, man, the party is downstairs. This is a little bit of an older crowd up here. Hollywood is downstairs. I said, well, you should have told me that. You didn't. So anyway, we start walking down, which is to the basement. And before I get to the basement, I just hear a crowd like exploding, like, yo, ho, like just the whole place is going like rocking. And the the stairwell itself is shaking. So when I get where I see everybody's like really hyped up. The dance floor is packed. People's hands are going all up in the air. The crowd is like chanting these slogans. And I have been doing parties now at this point for, about 5 years. And I saw the evolution even to the big disco parties like Studio 54 and places like that. The Paradise Garage, you probably heard of some of these places. but I had never seen anything like this. Never. So I stand there and I can't move. It's like cement in my feet. And I'm just looking at the crowd. And after the 2 songs, I go to Reggie. I'm like, yo, take me to the DJ booth. I got to talk to this guy. I got to get him to the Hotel Diplomat. So I go to, Reggie takes me to the DJ booth, and Hollywood he's inspired. He's in awe of meeting me. Oh, you're Jerry Productions? Oh, yeah, man, you the man, boom, boom, boom. I said, well, listen, what you were just doing is like, it's like, I don't know what I said, off the chain, I don't recall, but I got to get you down to 371 because we got to let people from Brooklyn, people from Queens, people from Manhattan, from Lower Manhattan, Harlem, people that don't want to come up here, people from Jersey, they got to hear what you're doing. So he's like, yeah, I've been wanting to play
the Sesame at the Hotel Diplomat.
We agree on a fee, whatever, and we work everything out, and I leave, and I'm so excited. So I get home that night, and that next day, that Sunday, I'm hyped. I wake up, I start working on the flyer. Monday morning, I call down to the Diplomat. I said, yo, I need this date. I'm doing blah, blah, blah. I go after school that day, after my college classes, I go to my graphics person. We work on the flyer. Then I take it to the printer. And by the end of the week, I got my flyers. And I'm so excited to be up on campus at City College giving out the flyers. And I'm telling everybody as I give them out, oh, come to the Diplomat, DJ Hollywood. And a lot of people, oh, I heard about him. And I'm giving them flyers to take back to their friends in Brooklyn. They got some friends from high school that go to Hunter College. They got some friends that go to Bronx Community College. So word is spreading. And then, of course, I had back then we used to use a mailing list. You think of mailing list now, you think of email. But back then it was no snail mail. And I had a mailing list. We put the flyers in an envelope and put a stamp on it and mail it to people. And we mail them a couple of flyers and they would start to give it out to their friends. So now 3 weeks later, it's the time for the party. And that Saturday night, I get to the Hotel Diplomat and it's people are coming in and it's just the tension in the air of excitement that you could hear from people. Now I waited downstairs to see the crowd, and I'm always at the box office, and not until the place was really getting packed when I start to see, okay, we got it. I mean, it's going to be slam packed. Do I get on the elevator and go upstairs? And when the elevator opens and the guy, back in those days you had elevator. If it wasn't a door, it was a gate. They would open this gate, and the whole place, like it must have been about 1,500 people in there, is going crazy. And Hollywood is saying, let's rock, and they would go, let's roll. And it's like being at a football game. And it was the beginning of people from the other boroughs of New York City for the first time hearing somebody, what you would say, rap or do hip hop over a full record that they had kind of heard about was happening in the Bronx, but now it's happening in front of their eyes.
Wow. Many people say hip hop started in the Bronx. Is that true? And was it because they took music classes and lessons out of the Bronx?
That's a good question. It's the end of that question about did it start? You had a lot of people who didn't know anything about the business or the beginnings or origins of hip hop, which is what I'm telling this story now, pre-recordings, is that, oh, they took the music out the classrooms, so the kids started scratching on turntables and they made this music and that's how hip hop started. That's BS. First of all, many of those DJs, grew up in poverty. Their parents didn't have money to go buy 2 turntables and buy them a record collection. They probably didn't have money on the weekend to even go buy a 12-inch, then yet alone buy hundreds of records. They weren't in a record pool yet. So that's not true. Those parents didn't have money to spend $3,000-$4,000 in money in the 70s, which would have been like $15,000 today, to buy a full studio system for kids because their kid wanted to learn to play the piano in school, and now there's no piano lessons, so their parents are going to go out and buy them all this equipment. That's just not true. Now, at this time in history in New York, there was a cutback in programs in the school. New York was going through a lot of problems. Ford, who was the president, said to New York City, drop dead. New York City was going bankrupt. I was a city employee with my job after school when I was a college student. I got laid off because the city was laying people off. And they were cutting education programs. But that had nothing to do with hip hop starting at all. What did happen was what I was saying before, and now in the Bronx, you had people like P.D.J. Jones, people like Flash, who later became Grandma, learning how to take the best part of a record and play it over and over again. This is even before the record companies did something like a 12-inch where Donna Summer would have this 15-minute record and it's the same beat, I'm in love, over and over again to keep people on the dance floor. These DJs were doing that. And I will give credit to guys in the Bronx, even though the guys from Brooklyn and Queens were doing it, some of the DJs in the Bronx were perfecting it a little bit better. So once again, you have to give the Bronx that type of credit.
Of course, Kool Herc needs to be mentioned.
Also, some of the early hip hop dancing, some of the styles were coming out of the Bronx, and also some of the imagery. Even though people would do graffiti in every borough in New York City, the Bronx claimed a lot of the graffiti because the trains would go to the last stop, which was way up at the end of the Bronx, and you could go and paint the train cars, which was called tagging, and because the train cars would be in the station all the way at the end of the Bronx. So some of these things that came out of hip hop, yes, a lot of that did come out of the Bronx, for sure.
Well said. So when the Sugar Hill Gang released Rapper's Delight, what was the response from promoters such as yourself?
Well, leading into that, what is interesting is when I was doing these parties, a lot of the DJs that I had started to take a cassette tape and record the parts of the party. And they were, unbeknownst to me, making copies and selling it to people. So I should have seen an opportunity to put my parties, which was an early beginning of rap, on record. And I didn't find out about this until like maybe a half a year later. And somebody said, oh, that the DJ so-and-so got a tape from the party and they're selling it. So I couldn't copyright my party, but I should have thought to myself, well, maybe there's a way to make this on the record. But who knew? But in any event, what does happen is the guys from the Sugar Hill Gang went up to 371 and they had a notebook and they started writing down what DJ Hollywood was saying, what Reggie Wells was saying. They admitted all of this. And if you want to say they stole, they copied, they took a lot of the ideas, a lot of their slogans, and then they were using those as lyrics along with a guy, I think his name is Grandmaster Caz, he called himself, with his rhyme book to create that first record. Now, some people will say, oh, disco had nothing to do with rap. More BS. Because if you look at the first rap record, which was the Sugar Hill Gang, which we're talking about, what was the record? It was a record by a group called Chic. Chic was the biggest disco group. They produced Diana Ross's Love Hangover and the songs that Biggie Smalls and Puffy did. That Chic's record, Good Times, was the first rap record. The whole record that people got excited and got on the dance floor and they went to buy was Chic's record. That's all they did was to take the music. And I don't want to give myself credit. I can't prove this. But one of my party productions names was Good Times Unlimited. Good Times. These are the good times. And people used to say that at my parties. Now, Chic does admit that they went to Studio 54 one night and they couldn't get in. And they were so mad that they went home and wrote this record real fast. And it was called, I'll say it, F off, which is fuck off, right? But they couldn't put that on the record, so it became Freak Off. Freak out, freak off. So, was it possible, because Bernard and Niles used to come to my parties, that they heard Good Times, Jerry Productions, Good Times, and wrote that record, These Are the Good Times? I don't know. I'm just saying. I could always prove what I say, But however they came up with it, that was the basis for the first rap record, which was really a disco record. So now what happens? Well, this record came out because there was a producer, a record company, Sylvia and Joe Robinson. Sylvia is deceased, so is Joe. And Sylvia had a big record herself called Pillow Talk. It's a big record. She was a singer herself. And they had a label, and it was a very famous R&B group called The Moments. And they used to make all these slow records, Love on the Two-Way Street. Because pre-disco, when you went to a party, it was slow records that were being played because you wanted to do a dance called the grind with a girl. So Sylvia and Joe Robinson had their label. They knew how to go to black radio and get records played. They had the connections for distribution, even though they were an independent little label. So when these guys from Jersey, the Sugar Hill Gang, go to Sylvia and Joe and say, hey, there's something new. It's called like this rapping thing. We should make a record. They take Chic's record. The guys go in the studio. They talk over it. And they put it out. And Frankie Crocker, who I work with, who was this popular DJ, Frankie really didn't like rap, but he had a relationship with Sylvia and Joe. BLS is the biggest station in New York, the biggest station in the country, the #1 station in the country. Frankie Crocker starts to play the record, and it just takes off. So we're all blown away because everybody's going, holy, I won't say it, because now this phenomenon, which had been brewing underground, is now on the radio and it's taking off. And people are in the clubs dancing. So, of course, myself, I'm an entrepreneur. I'm in the music business. I'm like, God damn it. Russell Simmons is like, God damn it. Elmo the Magic Christian is like, God damn it. Winston Sanders, God damn it. The Dow Twins. I'm just naming all these promoters. M. Morton Hall. All the New York promoters, because we knew we missed something, that we were out there years before promoting this, before it was on record. But I was one of the few people that was promoting it on a big scale. I even was responsible for the DJ Kid Capri, giving him his first chance to be a DJ. And of course, he's on Sirius XM Radio today.
Notice on this flyer, when rap started, we spelled rap, R-A-P-P.
Tour bus, one of the biggest DJs. Of a hip-hop DJ. I gave him his first start at the Hotel Diplomat. So we were all angry. So one of the things I did as I get ready to wrap up here is that many of us were scrambling to go to the record labels because we knew that we had all these other rappers, Richard Hott, Master P, Reggie Wells, Pete DJ Jones, Casey the Prince of Soul.
And the great DJ Starsky. Rest in peace.
All these guys were the real rappers, especially DJ Hollywood, Eddie Chiba. And so we start to go to these record labels. And Russell Simmons and I do a party at the Hotel Diplomat with Eddie Chiba, Reggie Wells, Grandmaster Flash, and the Furious Five, and Curtis Blow, who was also a classmate of mine from City College. And whoever wins this contest is going to get a record deal with Polygram Records. So it's a big party, big event, and Curtis gets chosen by the crowd as the winner. He gets this record deal, which was the first rap record on a major label, and the record is Christmas Rapping. And it becomes a big hit, launches Curtis's career, and then Russell's career, where Russell then goes on with his brother Joey, who used to carry Curtis's records and be called the Little Curtis Blow, to create Run DMC on an independent label. And of course, Run DMC with their first big record, It's Like That. I was one of the first ones to do a show with them in New York City. And, now the race is on. So I had someone who my brother grew up with, who was a family friend, who was the vice president of a big record label called Casablanca Records. Casablanca Records in 1978, 79 was the hottest record label. They had Donna Summer. They had the Village People. They had Kiss. They had Cameo. They had all of the major groups, Parliament Funkadelic. There was nobody hotter than them. And I go out to California to talk to this guy, Cecil Holmes, who was a friend of my older brother, who he had grew up with him. And my parents also knew his parents, to say, hey, listen, I'm trying to get into the record business. I'm kind of involved in this thing called rap, which is new. And I got all these guys in New York City that are rappers, and you got the hottest record label. Can we do something? And basically, the response I got was, you'll find this interesting. Rap music, that's just a fad. It's not going to last. And what was really hurting was, we don't make money off of a 12-inch, which was like an album that had one song. You play the same record, side A and side B. We make money off of an album. A 12-inch is just promotion. Remember the Sugar Hill Gang, it was a 12-inch. It was the same thing on each side of the record. So they said to me, why would we waste money doing a 12-inch of a rap record? We can't make money off that. We only make money off albums. And who would ever buy a whole album of rap music? Isn't that funny? And then the next thing I did, about a year later, I had a group signed to Motown Records. Go back out to LA. I didn't meet with Berry Gordy, but I met with some of his other executives and the biggest attorney in the Motown Records, the A&R people. And I'm meeting about my group. So I'm trying to figure out how to do this. We finished the meeting. And I said, gentlemen, as you know, there's this thing called rap music, and they're all looking like, oh. And I'm like, it's a New York phenomenon, but this is what the young people like. And I'm trying to say this to them in a way that's not disrespectful, which was, you call yourselves the sound of young America. You say that, Motown is the sound of what young people like. But that was true 15 and 20 years ago. The Temptations, the Four Tops, the Supremes, these groups are older now. They're approaching in their 50s. This is the future. This is what young people like. So they looked at me and I said, I got something I want you to hear. And I had recorded, which was actually the first rap slow record that was ever done. It was called Love Rap Ballad. I put it in the cassette deck. I start to play it. I'm looking at them. And after not even 2 minutes, the head A&R guy walked over to the cassette deck. He pressed stop. He took it out. He handed it back to me and said, we're not interested in anything like that. Within 2 years, Motown would be out of business. So, there's other stories. I work with James Mtume, who just died a year ago, God bless his soul, who, as you know, the song Juicy Fruit, Biggie, his biggest record, was from James Mtume's record. And James Mtume had produced Phyllis Hyman, Stephanie Mills. He worked with Roberta Flack. And I met James at a seminar, talked to him about rap music. He was interested. I went down to Sigma Sound Studios. We had a meeting. And then his people and I started to go to other record labels. We went to Columbia. We went to Atlantic. They were kind of interested, but it was just a non-starting point. And people don't know, at that time, the major labels had no interest in rap music because it was only 12 inches. It was only being played maybe in New York and California. It wasn't being played in the South. Radio station programmers didn't like rap music because they said whenever they put a rap music record on, the women who were listening changed the station. So it was an uphill fight. And that's why, in closing, you really cannot give credit enough to Russell Simmons because he hung in there, he stuck with it, he kicked those doors open, he got a deal with Columbia, which led to the career of LL Cool J and a lot of those artists. And then even when that deal went away, which was really a production deal, him and Leor went on to create Def Jam, which became the hottest rap label, when they had their major deal through another major label, which they owned until they sold it in the early 2000s. So you can't really tell the story without Russell Simmons, because who knows, would this industry be what it is today? I don't know.
Wow, that's interesting, because Russell Simmons in his book says about you, he says, as I started to grow my business, I watched how other promoters were handling their operations. Jerry Roebuck is now best known for promoting the huge black expos that have been institutions in the African American community for almost 2 decades. But back in the day, Jerry was a party promoter. He would give out flyers to his events with headlines that read, Jerry Roebuck in association with Harold Maynard, another promoter, and Reggie Wells, a top DJ. So I started headlining my flyers, Rush Productions in association with Rudy Toppin and Curtis Blow. I became Rush, the force in college parties, which gave my show an identity. Guess it was an early example of branding.
Well, I thank him for that, and you know his branding went on to create not only the Def Jam brand, but the apparel. You know that his apparel, Fat Farm, and of course he did the Def Comedy Jam. He did films. I mean, so much. So I appreciate him acknowledging his early experience with branding. You know, looking at what I was doing with my parties, and I learned through doing parties to do a lot of other branding by creating Black Expo, helping a lot of other companies become successful, and working with America's biggest corporations, Coca-Cola, Philip Morris, Western Union, AT&T, and help do ethnic marketing for those companies.
I also did these first. That was the first recorded rap concert, technically with DJ Hollywood at City College Gymnasium, selling out 5,000 tickets in advance with DJ Hollywood, Evelyn Champagne King, Linda Clifford, and Harold Melvin in the Blue Notes. Also, perhaps the biggest party in New York City history at Barnes International, where we shut down Times Square with the first major appearance of Africa Bambaataa and Soul Sonic Force. Every precinct in the borough of Manhattan had to come to restore order. It was like New Year's Eve in Times Square, a once in a lifetime.
So I hope you enjoyed this conversation. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And like I said, this is a prelude because I'm going to talk about what was it like pre-disco era and the party scene that led to the beginnings of disco. And from that, we got rap music. Hope you enjoy.
Rest in peace, my good friend and ex-partner, Harold Greg Maynard.